Every part of the United Kingdom is now in lockdown, with people being urged to stay at home as the scale of the public health emergency becomes even more daunting.
The world had stopped. Empty streets, silent airports, a nation behind locked doors. On the screens, the numbers climbed. Infections, deaths, panic. Inside hospitals, nurses wrapped themselves in plastic bags. Britain was desperate for protection. And that desperation opened doors.
While the country was frozen, billions of pounds began to move. Hidden contracts signed at speed, oversight abandoned for urgency. Behind the curtain of emergency rules, a shortcut was created. The so-called VIP lane, a private route for political friends to win public money. And through that lane came a company no one had ever heard of. No factory, no staff, no record. Just a name typed into company's house. PPE Medpro.
Days later, it was handed a government deal worth £122 million. Medical gowns that were supposed to save lives, but would never be used. They weren't sterile. They weren't certified. They weren't safe. Yet someone walked away a millionaire. And when the papers were traced, one name kept coming back, a Baroness of the realm.
This is Baroness Michelle Mone and her husband Doug Barrowman, and today was the deadline for the company he founded and she promoted to repay millions received for faulty PPE.
She denied everything, said she had no involvement, but the money trail told a different story, one that led to offshore trusts, frozen assets, and a scandal at the heart of power. A £122 million lie, hidden behind a title of nobility. The contracts came thick and fast, billions in government spending, all signed in the name of emergency. The system was built on trust, speed, and chaos. Officials were told to act now, check later. And somewhere in that fog of panic, a shortcut quietly appeared.
High priority lane was created for referrals from MPs, lords, and a range of senior officials. And if you got access to the high priority lane, you were much more likely to get a contract. A parliamentary committee says around 1 in 10 suppliers which came through the high priority lane were awarded a contract.
The government's high priority lane, better known as the VIP route. If you knew the right person, you skipped.
Inside that lane, one name started to move quickly. PPE Medpro Limited, a company registered in the Isle of Man by a small group of associates with no track record in medical equipment, no website, and no public footprint. But within a week of its registration, the company was being discussed at the highest levels of the Department of Health.
The introduction came from inside Westminster itself. Internal documents later revealed that the recommendation came directly from Conservative peer Baroness Michelle Mone. She told journalists she was simply helping the government connect with suppliers. But her name was on the internal correspondence, the same emails that routed PPE Medpro through the VIP lane.
Within days, officials approved 2 contracts worth nearly £200 million. The largest, a £122 million deal for sterile surgical gowns. The paperwork said the gowns met NHS safety standards, but they didn't. And what no one inside the Department of Health seemed to ask was this: who actually owned PPE Medpro?
Because behind the signature on those contracts was a maze of offshore entities, trusts and shell companies stretching from London to the Isle of Man. And at the center of it all, a couple living a luxury life far from the hospital floors their gowns were meant to protect.
When investigators began following the money, they discovered the company itself was only the surface. Behind PPE Medpro stood a network of offshore entities, trusts, holding companies, and nominee directors stretching across jurisdictions. It was a textbook structure for concealing ownership. And right in the center of that web was Douglas Barrowman, a wealthy financier based in the Isle of Man and the husband of Baroness Michelle Mone.
The money flowed fast. Government payments arrived in PPE Medpro's accounts, and within days, large transfers were made to other companies within Barrowman's business group. According to investigators, more than £60 million was moved through the Isle of Man to accounts linked to his network of trusts. From there, assets were purchased, property, jewellery, even a private jet share, and through a family trust, tens of millions found their way into accounts where Michelle Mone and her children were named beneficiaries.
For years, she denied any involvement, denied ownership, denied benefit, denied knowledge. But as journalists pressed and court documents surfaced, her own lawyers eventually confirmed the link. Yes, she and her husband were behind PPE Medpro. The story she had spent 3 years denying was true all along.
By late 2023, the National Crime Agency obtained a court order to freeze £75 million in assets tied to the couple. The restraint order covered homes in London, Scotland and the Isle of Man, as well as bank accounts and investments. Still, they maintained their innocence.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing. I wasn't trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes, and I regret and I'm sorry for not saying straight out, yes, I am involved. My family have gone through.
Claiming it was all a misunderstanding, that they had merely facilitated a business opportunity. But to investigators, the evidence told a simpler story. A government contract turned into private profit, hidden beneath layers of offshore secrecy. By the summer of 2024, the government had had enough. After months of denials, reports, and pressure from Parliament, the Department of Health filed a lawsuit against PPE Medpro. The claim was simple: breach of contract. The gowns delivered were not sterile, not certified, and could never be used in the NHS. The government demanded repayment of the entire £122 million, plus costs and damages.
The High Court has ruled that a company linked to the former Conservative peer Baroness Mone and her husband Doug Barrowman must repay the UK government almost £122 million for breaching a contract to supply surgical gowns during the pandemic.
For Michelle Mone and Douglas Barrowman, the legal pressure was becoming unbearable. Their bank accounts were frozen, their properties listed in restraint orders, and every tabloid headline carried their names.
This is Baroness Michelle Mone and her husband Doug Barrowman.
For the first time, the story that began in silence had become a national scandal.
A High Court judge has ruled that a PPE company linked to the Conservative peer Baroness Mone must repay the government almost £122 million.
A company linked to the peer Baroness Mone and her husband Doug Barrowman has been ordered by the High Court to pay the government £122 million in damages.
In October 2025, the High Court delivered its verdict. PPE Medpro had breached its contract. The judge ordered the company to repay the full £122 million, rejecting only a small additional claim for storage costs. But by then, the company was already on the brink of collapse. Within days, administrators were appointed, and the government was told there was little chance of recovering the money.
The headlines called it a victory, but it didn't feel like one. Britain had won a case but lost the cash. A company that had been nothing more than a shell had siphoned millions through offshore accounts and now stood empty on paper. And at the center of it all, the Baroness, who said she knew nothing, was still under criminal investigation.
The public wanted answers. How had a single introduction turned into one of the most expensive scandals of the pandemic? How could ministers allow it? And why was no one yet behind bars? In the High Court, the judgment was final, but in the court of public opinion, the reckoning was only just beginning.
The High Court's judgment sent shockwaves through Westminster. For years, ministers had insisted the procurement process was sound, that every contract was necessary, that every supplier was vetted. But the Medpro ruling proved otherwise. Billions had been spent, and at least one of those deals had turned into an outright disaster. The government tried to distance itself, claiming it had relied on the information it was given at the time.
Around 9,000 people came forward, and all ministers will have experienced endless people directly ringing them up to try and help with the huge need that there was at the time. And many of us as backbenchers will have also had approaches from constituents who were keen to help and needed somewhere to be referred on to.
But documents told a different story. that officials were warned repeatedly about the risks of the VIP lane.
Public anger grew louder. Front pages demanded accountability. Opposition MPs called for a full inquiry into pandemic contracts. But within Downing Street, silence. No apologies, no resignations, just a quiet reshuffling of departments and portfolios. For Baroness Mone, the pressure became unbearable. She took a leave of absence from the House of Lords, retreating from public view. Yet even in her absence, her story had become a symbol of everything Britain had come to hate about political privilege.
In interviews, ministers described the Medpro scandal as an isolated incident. But leaked correspondence suggested otherwise. The VIP lane wasn't one bad deal, it was a network, a system of recommendations and fast-tracked approvals that awarded contracts worth billions to companies linked to donors, lobbyists and party insiders. For the families of NHS staff who died without proper protection, that reality was unforgivable. And for a public still recovering from lockdowns and losses, the outrage never truly faded.
By late 2025, parliamentary committees reopened hearings into pandemic spending. But as with so many British scandals, the noise eventually dulled, the headlines moved on, and accountability once again dissolved into bureaucracy. The VIP lane had made its money. The Baroness had made hers, and the truth, buried beneath paperwork and privilege, was left for history to remember. PPE Medpro wasn't the only name on the VIP list, it was just the one that finally came apart. Behind the headlines lay hundreds of other contracts, deals awarded to friends, donors, lobbyists and companies that had never supplied medical equipment before. In total, the government handed out more than £12 billion through fast-track procurement during the pandemic. Some of those contracts delivered what they promised, many didn't. And billions of pounds worth of PPE now sits in storage, unused, expired or destroyed.
The system that was supposed to protect lives had become a gold rush for the connected. From political advisors turned consultants to dormant firms suddenly transformed into PPE suppliers. The pandemic opened a door that Britain's elite had been waiting for. A rare moment when oversight disappeared and money flowed without questions. The scandal was never just one company or one peer. It was the culture that allowed it to happen.
Across Parliament, committees began tallying the damage. £4 billion written off as unusable, £8 billion under investigation. The numbers are staggering, but the accountability is almost non-existent. The National Audit Office called it a systematic failure of due diligence. The press called it what it was, corruption in plain sight.
From PPE Medpro to Randox, Ayanda, and other VIP lane deals, each case followed the same pattern: a connection, a recommendation, and a reward. Britain's pandemic response became a business model, and in the process, trust in government reached an all-time low. In the end, it was never just about one contract or one company. It was about what happens when power forgets accountability, when political connections become currency, and crisis becomes opportunity. The pandemic exposed Britain's weakest point: a system built on trust, but hollowed out by privilege. The people on the front lines were fighting to save lives, while others were quietly cashing in.
The High Court may have ruled, but the investigation continues. The National Crime Agency is still tracing money through a maze of offshore accounts, still questioning witnesses, still searching for proof of fraud and bribery. So far, no criminal charges have been filed, but the paper trail remains, and so does the question that has haunted this story from the start. Who else was in the room when the money moved?
For every contract exposed, there are a dozen still hidden, files marked confidential, sealed under commercial sensitivity. And as time passes, the truth risks fading with them. But the story of PPE Medpro isn't over. The investigation is still live, the money is still missing, and the Baroness still waiting for her day in court.
Because corruption doesn't vanish with headlines. It hides, it adapts, it waits for the next opportunity, and unless someone keeps watching, it will happen again. Subscribe for more investigations into the scandals, money trails, and power plays shaping our world, because only by following the money can we expose the truth.